I always thought heartbreak would come like a storm, loud, destructive, impossible to miss. But mine arrived quietly, in the middle of an ordinary afternoon, disguised as a smile I had seen 1,000 times before. The day my life changed, I was standing outside a cafe, waiting for Arav, the man I thought I would marry. We had been together for almost 2 years. I knew his coffee order, his late-night fears, the exact way his voice softened when he was tired. I also knew, at least in theory, that I loved him. But love is a strange thing. Sometimes you don't realize when it's withering. Sometimes you don't notice your own loneliness until you see it reflected back at you from the outside. I was scrolling through my phone when I heard his laugh, warm, familiar, the one he used to save for me. I looked up, and in that moment, the world rearranged itself. Arav was standing a few feet away, not alone, with another man. They weren't talking, or arguing, or greeting each other. They were kissing. Not a drunken accident. Not a slip of impulse. A kiss that looked like history, like continuation. My heart did not break. It simply went still. Not pain. Not betrayal. Just a quiet, crushing confirmation of a loneliness I had been trying not to name. I don't know how long I stood there. Maybe seconds. Maybe a lifetime. He saw me. The kiss broke. His face changed, panic, guilt, apology, none of which reached me. He said my name. I didn't answer. I turned, walked away, and in that silence, something inside me finally stopped pretending it was fine. That same night, I said yes to the arranged marriage proposal my parents had been pushing for months. Not because I wanted a husband. Not because I wanted safety. Just because I wanted numbness. I thought choosing a stranger would spare me the weight of disappointment. But fate, or irony, had other plans. Because the stranger I was about to marry, he was not a stranger at all. He was the man I would eventually fall in love with, gently, slowly, unavoidably. His name was Kian, and I hadn't even met him yet. My parents were relieved when I agreed. They took my quiet acceptance as maturity, progress, even. They didn't ask why my voice sounded like something had been hollowed out of it. Within 3 days, the families had exchanged details. A preliminary meeting was arranged. I didn't bother asking for photographs or background. I wasn't choosing him, I was surrendering to him. The restaurant was small and calm, the kind of place meant for polite beginnings. I sat across from my parents, listening to them talk about futures I didn't feel connected to. My chest felt like glass, not yet shattered, just dangerously thin. His family is on the way, my mother murmured, smoothing her dupatta as if preparation could soften destiny. I nodded, not trusting my voice. I didn't know what I was expecting, maybe an older man, detached, someone just as resigned as me. But when the door opened, and he walked in, I forgot how to breathe. Kian. He wasn't looking at us yet, he was speaking softly to his mother, the kind of soft that doesn't perform politeness, it is politeness. There was a gentleness to the way he stood, a composure that looked lived in, not learned. When his eyes finally lifted and met mine, something in my chest moved. Not fireworks, not lightning, just recognition. Like I had been lonely for so long that even quiet kindness felt louder than love. He sat across from me, and for a long moment, neither of us spoke. Our parents filled the silence with backgrounds and expectations, education, stability, family values, all the checkboxes people mistake for compatibility. But Kian's silence wasn't distant. It was attentive. He wasn't scanning me like a future obligation. He was seeing me. When our families excused themselves to let us talk privately, I expected awkward rehearsed formality. Instead, Kian looked at me gently and said, "You don't have to pretend with me." It startled me, the way he said it, like he already knew I was wearing grief disguised as composure. I wasn't pretending, I murmured. He tilted his head, not calling me a liar, just inviting truth. "You're hurting," he said softly. "Not from this meeting. From something before it." My throat tightened. I should have denied it. But denial requires energy. And I was tired. "You don't even know me," I whispered. Kian's voice was calm, almost quiet. Sometimes not knowing someone lets you see them more clearly. I looked at him then, really looked, and for the first time since the cafe, my chest didn't feel heavy. Not healed, not happy, just breathing. And for a man I had just met, that was already a kind of miracle. We didn't decide anything that day, No promises, no future planning, not even a comfortable rhythm of conversation. But something about Kian lingered long after the meeting ended. He didn't try to impress me. He didn't try to study me. He simply sat with me, as if silence was not a barrier but an invitation. Our families discussed dates and formalities in the background, but all I could hear was the quiet steadiness of his voice when he finally said, before leaving, "If you ever feel overwhelmed, you don't have to hide it from me." He didn't say I'll fix it. He said I'll hold space for it. It was a strange kind of comfort, unfamiliar, undeserved, but grounding. In the days that followed, messages began, not frequent, not intrusive, just consistent. Greater than did you get home safely? I hope today wasn't too heavy. Drink something warm before bed. It might help you sleep better. They weren't romantic. They were gentle. Gentleness, I learned, can feel like a foreign language when you've grown used to being half seen. Sometimes I replied. Sometimes I didn't. Either way, he never pushed. He didn't try to fill silence. He respected it. One evening, after 3 nearly message-less days, he texted again. Greater than I won't ask what you're going through. But I'm here when you're ready for company instead of solitude. Not love. Not even affection. Just presence. I don't know why I typed back. Maybe loneliness, maybe curiosity, maybe the quiet safety of him, but I found myself sending. Greater than would you like to meet? He replied in less than 10 seconds. Greater than tell me when and where. We met at a small park near my apartment, not the cafe crowds, not family formality, just open sky, trees, and stillness. Kian arrived with 2 cups of tea and a scarf draped over his arm. You looked cold last time, he said simply, offering it. Not demanding I take it. Not insisting. Just offering. I took it. My fingers brushed his. No spark. No jolt. Just warmth, the kind that doesn't announce itself, it stays. We sat quietly for a while, watching the evening settle into the city. After several minutes, he spoke, voice low, careful. You don't have to tell me the story, he said, looking ahead instead of at me, but you don't have to carry it alone either. Something in me wavered, not enough to spill truth, but enough to soften the edges of my restraint. Why are you being this kind to me? I asked. Kian didn't answer immediately. He took a breath, thoughtful. Because someone has to treat you gently, he murmured. Otherwise you'll start to believe you weren't meant for it. My chest tightened. Not from pain, from recognition I didn't know where to place. He didn't reach for my hand. He didn't move closer. He just stayed. Quiet, present, steady. And for the first time since everything fell apart, my loneliness loosened its grip by the smallest, barely visible fraction. Not healed. Not repaired. Just seen. We didn't plan to meet again so soon. I had told myself I needed time, distance, space to keep this arrangement from turning into something that resembled hope. But hope has a way of returning quietly, not through promises, but through presence. It was past 10 when my phone buzzed. Not a call. Just a message. Greater than are you struggling to sleep again? I stared at the screen for a long moment, wondering how he knew. Then I replied before I could overthink it. Greater than yes. A pause. 3 dots. Then, greater than come downstairs. Fresh air might help. He didn't say I'll take care of you. He said I'll stand beside you while you take care of yourself. I wrapped a jacket around my shoulders and went down. Kian was waiting near the gate, hands in his pockets, posture relaxed, as though this was the most natural thing in the world. Walk? He asked. No pressure. No analysis. Just a question I could step into at my own pace. I nodded. We walked toward the quieter streets, where the city softened into silence. The night was cool, distant headlights passing like brief constellations. For a while, neither of us spoke. And strangely, I didn't feel like I was supposed to. Halfway down the street, he slowed his steps, looking ahead as he spoke. You carry your sadness very quietly, he said. Not as accusation, not as pity, just observation, gentle, precise. I swallowed. Some things were easier to hold alone. Kian shook his head faintly. They're easier to hide alone. Not hold. His voice had that softness again, the kind that doesn't try to break your walls, just stands patiently beside them. We sat on a low boundary wall near a closed flower shop. The scent of leftover petals lingered faintly in the cool air. Kian didn't look at me when he asked, "Is it heartbreak?" My breath caught. Not because the question hurt, because he had waited this long to ask. I nodded once. He didn't follow with what happened. Or who was it. Or tell me everything. He simply said, quietly, "I'm sorry you had to go through it alone." A strange warmth pricked behind my eyes. Not tears, not yet. Just the ache of being understood. I looked down at my hands. People only notice pain when it spills out. If you're silent, they assume you're fine. Kian turned his head slightly toward me. "I don't," he murmured. I didn't know what to do with the weight of that gentleness, how to hold it without feeling like it would spill into something I wasn't ready for. The quiet stretched, but it wasn't empty. The night wrapped around us like a cocoon, thin, fragile, but sheltering. After a while, he spoke again, voice lower than before. "You don't have to tell me the past. Just let me be here in the present." Something in my chest loosened, the smallest unknotted thread of grief. I didn't touch him. He didn't reach for me. But for the first time in months, I didn't feel like I was surviving. I felt like I was allowed to rest. I don't know why I texted him again the next evening. Maybe because silence had started to feel less like safety and more like an echo. Maybe because I was beginning to associate calm with him instead of solitude. Or maybe because letting someone witness a wound is the closest thing to breathing after drowning. "Greater than, are you nearby?" His reply came almost instantly. "Greater than, yes. Do you want company?" I hesitated. Company was different than conversation. Company meant letting someone step closer than the edge. But my fingers typed before fear could intercept. "Greater than, yes." We met. On the same quiet street where we had walked the night before. This time, he didn't suggest walking. He simply stood beside me, waiting, as though presence itself was a question I had permission to answer at my own pace. I drew in a breath, steadying myself. There was someone, I murmured, looking at the pavement instead of him. Someone I thought I would build a life with. Kian didn't interrupt. He didn't shift closer. He just listened. We were together for a long time. I thought it meant trust. I thought it meant future. I paused, searching for air. But it turns out, I was the only one building anything. A quiet beat. And one day, I said softly, I realized I was standing alone in something I believed we were sharing. Not a confession. Not details. Just the outline of a wound. Kian's voice came slowly, like he was choosing each word with care. "You weren't left because you were unworthy of love. You were left because someone couldn't meet you at the depth you were offering." My throat tightened. Not from sadness, from recognition. I turned slightly toward him. "You speak like you've known this feeling." He gave a small exhale, not quite a sigh, more like the release of a truth he wasn't ready to shape yet. "Pain recognizes pain," he said quietly. "That doesn't require a story. Just understanding." There was a pause, the kind that deepens connection rather than breaks it. I didn't realize until then that my hands had curled into the fabric of the scarf he gave me, like it was something grounding. "I don't know if I can trust someone again," I admitted, voice barely above a whisper. Kian didn't respond immediately. He let the vulnerability have space, not interruption. Then, gently, "You don't have to trust me yet," he said. "Just don't shut me out." A single line, quiet, unassuming, yet something inside me shifted around it. Not cracked open, just loosened. For months, I had been drowning slowly. Tonight, for the second time, I surfaced. Not because someone saved me, but because someone stood close enough for me to breathe. The weather had been threatening rain all afternoon, gray clouds folding over the city like someone dimming the world on purpose. I hadn't planned to see him that day. Routine was beginning to feel safe again, and I had almost convinced myself I didn't need the quiet comfort he brought. But as I stepped out of the office building, the sky broke wide open. Heavy rain, sudden and relentless. I rushed toward the nearest shelter, a closed cafe with a narrow awning. I wasn't alone for long. Footsteps approached. Slow, familiar. Kian. His hair was half damp, shirt darkened at the shoulders, but he didn't look bothered. Just relieved, not by the shelter, but by seeing me. "You'll catch a cold," he said softly, removing his scarf. Before I could protest, he wrapped it around me, the same scarf I had clung to last night. But this time, he was the one adjusting it close to my neck, fingers brushing lightly against my collar. Not intimacy. Not tenderness. Just care. Yet my heartbeat reacted as if it were all three. The wind funneled under the awning, pushing me slightly toward him. For a moment, I stood too close, close enough to feel his warmth beneath the wet fabric of his shirt, close enough to smell rain on his skin, close enough to realize how long it had been since proximity felt like safety instead of threat. "You're shivering," he murmured. "I'm fine," I lied. He didn't argue, instead, he took a half step closer, creating a barrier from the wind with his body. Our shoulders brushed, not accidental, not deliberate, just inevitable. Something shifted in my breath. Not longing, not desire, just the unfamiliar sensation of being protected. A car splashed through a puddle, water spraying our direction. Without thinking, Kian moved, arm coming around me in instinct, shielding me before the water reached. The touch lasted only a second, but my body remembered it long after his hand fell back to his side. His voice came quieter this time. "You don't have to be okay all the time." I didn't answer. Couldn't. Because for the first time in months, maybe years, someone had stepped in front of the world for me without asking for anything in return. And I realized something I hadn't before: healing doesn't always begin with trust. Sometimes, it begins with shelter. We stood there in silence, rain falling heavy beyond the awning, his shoulder brushing mine through the chill, and for the first time, loneliness loosened its grip on my ribs. Not because I was no longer alone, but because someone else chose to stay. The rain didn't let up for nearly 20 minutes, and in that quiet pocket of shelter, time felt suspended, not paused, but hovering gently between breaths. When it finally eased into a soft drizzle, we stepped out together. I didn't realize we were still walking close, too close, until I heard my name. "Veer." I turned. Standing a few feet away was Arav, my colleague from the office. He wasn't nosy by nature, but the way his eyebrows lifted made it clear he was fitting together a picture he hadn't known existed. His gaze flicked from me to Kian, then back to me. Not judgment, not suspicion, just recognition, like he'd seen a page before the chapter was meant to be read. I felt myself step half a pace away without meaning to, not because I didn't want to be seen with Kian, but because I didn't know yet what we were. "Long day?" Arav asked, tone casual but eyes sharper than before. "Yeah," I replied, clearing my throat, "just got caught in the rain." His attention returned to Kian. A quiet measuring, a wordless "oh." Kian nodded politely. Calm, self-contained, completely unbothered by the scrutiny my heart wasn't ready for. "I'll see you tomorrow," Arav said, still watching me, and something in the way he said it told me he wasn't talking about work anymore. When he left, the silence between us tightened. Kian didn't say, "You should have stood closer." He didn't say, "You don't have to hide me." He didn't say anything at all. That restraint, that patience, somehow made the moment heavier. I exhaled slowly. People might misunderstand. Kian glanced at me, expression unreadable, not hurt, not distant, just quietly aware. "And would it be a misunderstanding?" he asked softly. The question landed like a stone in still water, spreading ripples I wasn't prepared for. My throat tightened, because I didn't know the answer. Not yet. Before I could respond, he looked away, not avoiding me, but giving me space to breathe before my instinct to retreat could build walls. "We don't have to define anything," he added gently. "Not before you're ready. I'm not here to rush you." It should have relieved me. Instead, it unsettled me, in a tender way. Because for the first time, the idea of someone seeing us together didn't feel like exposure. It felt like inevitability. And that scared me far more than being seen. The next day, I caught myself looking for him without meaning to. Not waiting, looking. For his message, his presence, the quiet reassurance that had started to feel anchored. I told myself it was habit. It wasn't. Evening came, and I found him at the same quiet tea stall where we sometimes ended our walks. He was leaning against the counter, speaking softly to the vendor, sleeves pushed up, hair still a little messy from the rain. Ordinary and unguarded, but something inside me settled the moment I saw him, which should have frightened me. Instead, it grounded me. "Long day?" he asked when I approached. "Not really," I said, then realized the truth was simpler. It just felt longer without him in it. We took our drinks and sat along the low boundary wall of the park across the street. The night was clear again, the world washed clean. Kian spoke lightly about work, about a new book he'd started reading. I listened, really listened, Not because I felt obligated, but because his voice had become something I sought at the end of my day. Halfway through, someone else joined the vendor's counter. A young man, friendly, smiling, clearly familiar with Kian. They exchanged a nod, and something unexpectedly sharp pricked my chest. The man waved toward us. "You're here again, Kian. You disappear for weeks and now you're a regular." His gaze shifted to me. "Ah, that explains it." Kian opened his mouth, likely to dismiss it casually, but before he could, I spoke first. "He's with me." The words left me before I thought them through. Not loud, not territorial, just true. The man raised an eyebrow, amused, then offered a small nod of acknowledgement before turning back to order his tea. Kian didn't look at me right away. When he finally did, there was something softened behind his eyes, not triumph, not surprise, something quieter. Recognition. I looked away first, heat touching my face in the cool night air. I just didn't want him assuming things. Kian's voice was gentle, but not passive. Or did you not want him assuming access? I swallowed. My silence was answer enough. He didn't push, didn't tease, didn't label it. He simply accepted the shift that even I wasn't ready to name. Because it wasn't jealousy. And it wasn't love. It was something earlier, smaller, more fragile, the quiet realization that I didn't want to share the space he was beginning to occupy in my life. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Attachment. Unspoken, but unmistakable. Epilogue. The moment that became answer. The night we finally stopped pretending it was friendship began like every other. Quiet street, slow steps, conversation that didn't need volume to feel full. There was no storm, no crisis, no interruption from the world. Just stillness. Just him. We stopped at the little bridge near the park, the same spot where the city lights blurred into the water below. Kian leaned against the railing, soft glow from the street lamp catching the edges of his profile. For a moment, I only watched him, the calm he carried, the place he had become for me without either of us naming it. "I don't really understand what we are yet," I said quietly, hands curled around the railing. "But I know I don't want distance anymore." Kian turned toward me, not moving closer, waiting, like always, for me to meet him on my own terms. My voice was steadier than I expected. "You stayed when everything else in my life felt temporary. You made room for me when I didn't even know how to stand. And somewhere in all of that, I think I learned how to breathe again. A breath, a pause, a truth. I don't want to heal without you," I whispered. "I want to stay, with you." Something softened in his expression, not surprise, not relief, just homecoming. Like he had been waiting not for the words, but for the peace behind them. He lifted a hand, slowly, letting the moment speak before touch did, and brushed his thumb along my cheek. "Then stay," he said, voice quiet but certain. Not as someone recovering, but as someone choosing. The space between us dissolved like it had only ever been made of breath. He leaned in first, not claiming, not taking, offering. I met him halfway, and the kiss was as gentle as the confession that carried us there, slow, careful, reverent. Not an ending, a beginning spoken in silence. No urgency, no hesitation, just the soft realization that love doesn't always arrive with fireworks. Sometimes, it arrives as shelter. When we finally broke apart, foreheads resting together, he exhaled like the night had been holding both our hearts until this moment. "You're sure?" he murmured. I nodded, no tremor, no doubt. Completely. Not a rescue. Not a replacement. A choice.